Discover the hidden struggles of Vikings alone, a touching tale of 10 incredible life changes in the quaint, picturesque town of Norsewood. The legacy of the Peterson family hangs by a thread. Eric Peterson, a valiant veteran with a stout heart, toils each day on the rugged fields that echo the spirit of his Viking ancestors. The sun rises, casting a golden hue over the corn and wheat, but shadows loom large. The land that once thrived faces relentless economic challenges and encroaching urban sprawl, a dark cloud edging closer and closer to the very essence of what they hold dear. Each dawn they rise, knowing the battle for their farm and their pride is becoming harder to win. 17-year-old Leo stands at the crossroads of tradition and the allure of the city, wrestling with the expectations of a legacy that dates back centuries. His heart races like the wild horses of his heritage, yet his spirit often feels crushed under the weight of community whispers. Friends boast about city lights and easy living, while he clings to the old ways, the quiet evenings spent in the fields, and the heartfelt laughter of shared meals, all at risk of being forgotten. As the hot summer days turn into restless nights, Leo yearns for acceptance, haunted by the fear of judgment and the rising tide of change. The storm arrives like an omen one fateful evening, dark winds swirling and rain pelting the ground with ferocity. The once swaying stalks of corn are beat to the ground, dreams and livelihood laid bare. The devastation is swift, and soon voices emerge from every corner of Norsewood, murmurings of doubt directed at the Petersons, questions hanging heavy in the air. Can they rise again? Eric, ever proud, clings to silence, convinced that vulnerability is akin to defeat. Leo watches him retreat, a tightness in his chest growing as fresh losses pile upon layers of resolve. But Leo is filled with a determination sparked from deep inside. He hatches a plan to rally their neighbors, his passion transforming into action. A fundraiser, a gathering of hope, this is his vision, anchoring community spirit while reminding them of the Peterson legacy they hold dear. Yet as the day of the fundraiser approaches, threats begin to brew beneath the surface, as rising tensions spark rumors and accusations. Divisions fracture friendships at the local diner, turning them into opponents overnight. The night of the town meeting arrives, and Eric reluctantly steps out of the shadows of his pride. He stands, tightened and raw, caught between a lifetime of independence and the desperate call for connection from his boy at his side. Tension surges in the air as the chatter dies down. Leo's heart pounds, brimming with resolve yet fraught with uncertainty. The swirling unease fills the room, and Leo's mind drifts to the words that could transform everything. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Leo prepares to share his voice, will Eric stand alone, or will he break through the barrier of pride? Can they rekindle the bonds that unite them with their community? In this moment of looming despair, the question remains: will they fight for each other, or will the storm of judgment tear them apart forever? Eric stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding as he prepared to speak. The din of murmurs echoed in his ears, each whisper another reminder of the weight pressing down on him, the weight of expectations, history, and loss. Leo, filled with a youthful fire, was positioned beside him, his hand nervously fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Eric felt a swell of pride for his son, yet uncertainty gnawed at him. Would he find the courage to join this battle, to reshape their legacy? Tonight, we gather not just as neighbors but as family, Leo began, his voice wavering but steady. We have a choice to make, a choice about who we want to be. Are we going to let fear divide us? Or are we going to stand together, like our ancestors did? As he spoke, Eric could sense the rising tide of emotion in the room. But doubt danced at the edges of Eric's mind. Would the townsfolk see their struggle as a rallying point or another reason to cast judgment? Behind the bravado of Leo's words lay a fragile hope. He could feel the eyes of Longman, the town's unofficial leader, sharp and piercing. Every wrinkle in Longman's face seemed to speak volumes about the history between the families. The storm outside had settled, but the tempest brewing within the Peterson family surged. Let us not forget what the Petersons mean to our community, Leo continued, gathering momentum. The farm isn't just their home, it's ours too. They've fed us, welcomed us, shared their stories. They're part of us. Eric felt a warmth surge through his chest at Leo's passionate defense. Could it be? Could the community really feel that way? But just as the swell of solidarity began to rise, an unexpected voice cut through the air. And what about trade? We need progress, not nostalgia, Leo. It was Flora, an old friend turned rival, her tone cold as ice. Look at the abandoned fields. We can't just cling to a myth when tomorrow is knocking at our door. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the attendees. Eric felt Leo stiffen beside him, the fire in his sun dimming for just a moment. This was exactly the fear Eric had harbored, and now it was spewing out like a wound exposed. The walls of his pride threatened to close and Eric felt the uncertainty bogging him down. He took a step closer to Leo, who was struggling to respond. Flora, I understand your concerns, Eric interjected, surprising himself with the steadiness of his tone. But progress doesn't mean abandoning those who have helped build this community. They fought, like all of us, for a piece of this land. He felt the eyes on him, not as a giant among them but a father, vulnerable yet defiant. It ignited something in Leo, a glimmer of hope. Their eyes met, and Eric could sense his son reinvigorating. We can find a way forward together, Eric concluded, voice trembling but determined. The murmurs surged, voices mixing into a chorus of agreement and dissent. Leo's face lit up with newfound resolve. If we unite, we can build a future that honors our past. Let us plan the fundraiser, and prove that this land doesn't just belong to the Petersons, but to all of us. The room erupted, filled with possibilities. In that moment, Eric felt like a true Viking, emboldened to fight for what mattered. Leo had brought them together, igniting a spark, yet within the buzz of excitement lingered an underlying tension that felt stagnant and unresolved. As they were urged to brainstorm ideas for the upcoming event, Eric sensed that the real struggle was just beginning. They were battling more than just economic pressures. The fight was about identity, belonging, and the threads that knit them all together. But would it be enough for their neighbors to join them, or would the undercurrents of division threaten to drown out their shared hopes? The stakes were rising, and the heartbeat of Norsewood quickened as silent doubts loomed. What future could emerge from the flames of this gathering? Would the Petersons find their allies, or was the community too fractured to heal? As the room buzzed with chatter, Eric's gaze drifted to the window, where dark clouds had begun to gather once more, hinting that the storm was far from over. The excitement in the room crackled like electricity, but beneath it, Eric felt the air grow thick with tension. Voices blended into a chorus, some thrilled by Leo's call to unity, others still swayed by Flora's icy skepticism. He wished he could harness that energy, mold it into something solid, something that would hold them all together. How about a potluck? A voice shouted from the back, cutting through the discussions like a knife. Some in the crowd turned, curious and intrigued, while Flora rolled her eyes. That's not going to solve anything. We need a plan, structure. Maybe we could host a fair, Leo suggested, the spark in his eyes dazzling Eric. Games, food stalls, music. We could bring everyone together and celebrate our community. The idea hung in the air, buoyed by laughter and nods of agreement. Eric's heart swelled. This was the kind of spirit they needed, the kind that reminded him of the old days when neighbors leaned on each other without hesitation. Yet, a tiny voice in the back of his mind flickered with doubt. Could a fair, fun as it might sound, really unite them? Or would it just be another distraction from the challenges that faced them? Fun? While our fields rot. Flora scoffed, crossing her arms. We need to talk about resources, about the money we lack. Let us be practical. Eric noticed several heads nodding slowly, a wave of agreement rising that doused the fire Leo had ignited moments before. Just like that, the room shifted, hope tinged with reality fell heavy on their shoulders. Eric felt the corners of his vision darken, the crowd seemed to sway in indecision. His stomach churned as he fought against the sinking feeling. Each event we put together can pave the way for something more, Eric finally said, his voice breaking through the gathering clouds of discontent. It's not just a potluck or a fair. It's an opportunity to put our values on display. To show our resilience. Flora's glare met his, unyielding. If you think showing off our values will miraculously bring in funds, then you're dreaming. What about a petition? Petitioning for what? Leo interjected. To change hearts or just to fill our pockets? Eric could sense the tipping point nearing. There's truth in both sides, Eric said, frustration creeping into his voice. We need to honor our past, but we can't bury ourselves in it. It's the balance of respect and progress. If the Petersons lose their farm, what does that mean for us? He looked out across the sea of faces, hope and fear intertwined like ivy around a tree trunk. Some were silent in contemplation, while others glanced away, lost in their thoughts. He sensed the walls of division standing tall, yet deep down, he believed they could break them down if they pushed together. After a heavy pause, someone finally spoke up from the far corner. What if we also reached out to the next town over? Maybe they could help us with funding by seeing the events we're planning. The suggestion planted a seed, and a few heads perked up in interest. Conversations reignited, floating back to Leo's earlier notions. One idea began to cascade into others, perhaps a festival that drew their neighbors in, fostering connections and shared vision. As the chatter erupted, Eric felt a surge of determination. The storm clouds outside still swirled ominously, but inside, something resembling unity flickered. They were mending the fractures, step by slow step, surrounded by both hope and uncertainty. But as Eric's heart swelled with purpose, another voice, a voice he hadn't expected, cut through the jovial noise. And what if we don't get any help? What if it all falls apart? It was one of the newcomers, anxiety painting their features. Eric's heart sank, the new fear mixed with the fervor they had managed to garner. Would this sense of unity be enough to withstand the storms ahead, both within and outside Norsewood? As the discussions swirled around him, a different kind of cloud loomed, a potential divide larger than the one they faced today. What would happen when reality knocked? How long could their fragile hope hold? And with that weight pressing down, Eric found himself asking the question that hung in the air like a ghost, waiting for someone to acknowledge it. Could their faith in each other withstand the trials to come? Eric's thoughts spiraled as he stood in the midst of the vibrant chatter. The excitement in the room was palpable, but the newcomer's words echoed louder. What if it all falls apart? He turned his gaze to the group. Faces transitioned from laughter to shadows of doubt, a shift that was almost tangible. The worries they had tried to bury rose like smoke, suffocating the spark Leo had kindled. Could he really rally them? Just then, Leo stepped forward again, his voice steady but laced with emotion. We can't afford to lose hope. Sure, there's risk. But if we do nothing, we lose everything. The silence that followed was heavy. People shifted in their seats, murmurs fizzled out. Eric noticed Flora's tense expression. He could see the wheels turning in her mind, the conflict between her skepticism and the hope stirring around her. What if we started small? Eric suggested, seizing the moment. A mini-event, maybe just a community dinner. If it works, we can build on it. If not, we'll learn. Flora uncrossed her arms, an indication that she was at least considering it. You mean put it all on the line for a meal? She raised an eyebrow, but there was less coldness now. We might need more than good intentions. But think about it. Leo exclaimed, gesturing to the crowd. If everyone brings their favorite dish, it becomes more than a meal. It becomes a symbol of our unity and determination, a way to share what we have. Eric felt the crowd sway again, this time toward Leo's excitement. They could breathe life back into their community. "We can ask everyone to share stories alongside their dishes too," he proposed. "Bring their memories, bring our history back to life." Flora frowned, but the corners of her mouth twitched ever so slightly. "And what happens if half the town doesn't show up? Or if we can't even afford the supplies?" "Then we find a way to support each other," a voice piped up from the back, a young woman with bright eyes full of hope. "We'll cook together, share supplies. Do it as neighbors, not just as individuals." Eric felt a ripple of agreement wave through the room. It was as though a spark ignited a fire. He saw heads nodding, encouragement replacing doubt with a budding excitement. "Then it's decided," Leo said, raising his hands as if declaring victory. "Mini event it is. Let us call it the Norsewood Feast." "Feast? More like a snack," Flora retorted with a smirk, breaking the tension and weaving laughter through the crowd. But as joy spread through the room, Eric's heart warbled with conflicting emotions. What if their plans unraveled? What if the darkness began to creep back in once they stepped outside these walls? Before he could dwell further, a man at the back stood up. "What if we put out a call for volunteers? Not just to help organize but to share our stories? We all have something to offer, tales of hardship, strength, and how we survived." The challenge hung in the air, and Eric felt heat rise within him. This was at the moment where words morphed into action. Yet, even with their newfound resolution, his heart danced between hope and trepidation. Could they really sustain this? Eric looked at the faces around him, lit with glimmers of possibility and doubt. This was their chance. All of them together. As they began sharing ideas again, he felt the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on his shoulders. Unity was one thing, but keeping it alive was a whole other battle. With a breath, he leaned forward. "All right, everyone. Whatever happens, let us promise to stand together through it all. Good or bad. Together." But in the throes of burgeoning optimism, one thought lingered at the back of Eric's mind. What if when the time came to deliver, they couldn't pull it off? And if that happened, would they find themselves not only back at square one but also divided even further than before? As the energy pulsed through the room, Eric felt both exhilaration and profound doubt. What awaited them at their first gathering? Would this be the moment that sparked real change, or just another fleeting glimmer? And as the laughter and chatter rose again, a singular thought struck Eric. Could the path to unity be paved with the very stories that had once kept them apart? The days that followed the meeting were a whirlwind. Eric couldn't shake the feeling that every conversation, every shared story, was a thread weaving them closer together or a potential pitfall, threatening to unravel it all. As he and Leo began to plan the Norsewood feast, they found themselves poring over lists, making calls, and sending out flyers. One evening, after a long day of running around, Eric sat at his kitchen table with a half-eaten sandwich in front of him. Sunlight streamed through the window, but it felt dim compared to the gnawing worry in his chest. He scribbled down notes, each more frayed than the last, trying to envision how such a feast could actually happen. "What are you thinking?" came a soft voice from behind him. It was his sister, Clara, peeking into the room. Eric glanced up, forcing a smile. "Just working out logistics for the feast." Trying not to freak out, he admitted, shrugging slightly. Clara walked over, leaning against the counter with arms crossed. "You care too much, Eric. I mean, yes, you want this to succeed, but don't let that pressure crush you." He sighed. "It's just what if it all goes wrong? What if no one shows up, or they bring food that just doesn't work together? It could turn into a disaster. Or it could turn out just fine or even amazing," she replied, a playful smirk breaking through. "Think about how many people want to come together. They want to be heard, to feel connected. You're giving them a chance." Her words hung in the air, a gentle reminder that the feast was about more than just food. It was about hearts opening and sharing burdens, even if it meant confronting some uncomfortable truths. That evening, Eric and Clara spread flyers in the neighborhood, the crisp autumn air fragrant with fallen leaves. They knocked on doors and chatted with neighbors, inviting them face to face. Every conversation sparked more excitement, but beneath it, Eric felt that familiar knot of uncertainty tightening. As the days passed, with each volunteer that signed up, he felt buoyed slightly by their enthusiasm. It drew in more people, each promising to bring not just food, but pieces of themselves, their heritage, their history. Yet, he often caught Flora's skeptical glances when they discussed the final plans, and it troubled him. One afternoon, during a planning session in the community center, Eric took a breath and faced Flora directly. "I get that you're worried. I am too. But let us talk about this. What would make it feel like a success to you?" She hesitated, her lips twisting as if she were weighing her words. "I just don't want to see everyone get let down, Eric. Hope can be painful." "True," he replied, trying to meet her gaze without faltering. "But what if hope led us to something we can't imagine yet? What if these struggles bind us together instead?" He could see something shifting behind her eyes, a flicker of understanding, perhaps. "Maybe that's what scares me." The conversation lingered, a mix of vulnerability and strength, echoing in the back of Eric's mind as he laid awake that night. They were stepping into a new territory, one that could either stitch up old wounds or rip them wide open. Night turned into morning, and the day of the Norsewood feast finally dawned. Eric felt the pulse of anticipation thrumming in the air, mingled with his anxiety. Friends and neighbors bustled around the community center, the aroma of homemade dishes enveloping them like a warm blanket. Yet consideration for all that could go wrong loomed. Would they remember the stories? Would the gathering shine a light on their past pain, or would joy emerge from it like a phoenix? Taking a deep breath, Eric stepped out to the center of the room, ready to say a few words. The chatter faded slightly, and all eyes turned towards him. But even as he opened his mouth to speak, one thought raced through his mind: if they were to share their pain along with their joy, what hidden struggles might surface in the process? As he stood there, heart pounding, a wave of uncertainty washed over him, leaving his spirit suspended between hope and dread. Would stories they shared bring healing or stir up old wounds? Something in the atmosphere changed as Eric faced the crowd. The room, vibrant with laughter and the mingling scents of diverse dishes, suddenly felt charged. They were all here, faces familiar and new, but Eric's voice seemed to tremble within, battling against the weight of what was to come. "Thank you all for being here," he began, and the hum of voices fell silent. "This feast is more than just about food. It's about us coming together, sharing stories, our histories, the good and the bad." There were nods from the crowd, and encouragement. The vulnerability hung there, raw yet inviting. But behind the smiles were shadows, hidden stories waiting to be coaxed into the light. He caught Flora's eye, her serious expression pulling at his heart. If he was going to encourage openness, he had to be brave. As he saw people's expressions soften, he took a bold step. "I know many of us carry burdens. I do too. This isn't just a gathering, it's a chance to weave together our lives, to understand one another in a new way." The words felt palpable in the air, a rallying call. As he spoke, he noticed an older woman at the back of the room. Her hands trembled as she held a pot of stew, a deep sadness in her eyes. Was she remembering the past? He hoped she would share. "Let us take this opportunity, share your stories, your triumphs, your losses," Eric continued. There was a flicker of anticipation among the crowd, and he felt a shift in the room. Could they all sense it? That shared weight of waiting stories, like dormant seeds ready to bloom. Just then, a young girl, no more than 8, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, are we gonna tell our story?" she asked, her voice bright and innocent, breaking the tension. The mother hesitated, her gaze drifting to Eric as if seeking permission. "Absolutely," Eric said, his heart swelling. "Every story matters, no matter how big or small." The girl's mother smiled softly, and Eric watched as the woman began to speak. Her voice trembled at first but grew steadier. My mother always told me stories about her childhood in a different country, how simple things like bread and laughter brought people together. As she spoke, others leaned in closer, energized by her words. One by one, stories began to unfurl. Real-life threads of heartbreak, love, and resilience wove through the air. A neighbor recounted the way her grandmother fought to keep family traditions alive. Someone else shared the struggles of an immigrant's journey. Eric literally felt the weight of history surrounding him, lifting within that room. Yet, there was Flora, still watching, still hesitant. Eric's heart ached, a knot tightening in his chest. Would she let herself be seen? Would she let them in? As the stories unfolded like petals blooming, laughter broke forth with tears. Eric found himself caught in a whirlpool of emotions, struggling to hold back his own. This was magic. But what would happen when the stories turned darker? When the laughter gave way to echoes of pain? As the last story was shared, he looked around. There was hope blooming here, but also raw vulnerability that left him breathless. I know it's hard, he said, as the energy in the room shifted once more, to share our wounds. But what if we find healing together? There was silence, a collective pause. From the back, the older woman spoke again, her voice steadier this time. I lost my son a few years ago. I keep him in my heart, but it hurts so much. She paused, several people nodding in shared understanding. I'd like to honor him here today. Eric felt a rush of emotion. Hope could indeed be painful. Would the floodgate of shared sorrows unleash something that would bind their hearts closer together, or would the weight of grief drown them in a collective sorrow too deep to navigate? As the room held its breath, Eric sensed an invisible thread knitting them together, but what new struggle awaited as they journeyed deeper into their stories? As the older woman's words hung in the air, a ripple of empathy coursed through the room. Eric could see tears welling in the eyes of those closest to her. It was as if her grief had sparked a fire, illuminating the hidden hesitations of others who had been muffled by their own pain. He knew he had to nurture this fragile openness. Thank you for sharing that, Eric said, his voice trembling with emotion. Honoring him here is a powerful act of love. He glanced around, urging others to consider taking that brave step. Who else feels ready to share? Slowly, a man with a weathered face stood up. He had always been an enigma, a quiet observer at the fringes of their social gatherings. I lost my partner last year, he said, his voice gravelly but clear. They were my heart, my home. Tears trailed silently down his cheeks. I still talk to them every day. I just think, if I let go of the pain, I might lose their memory. A hush fell over the gathering, each person feeling the weight of his revelation. Eric observed the reactions. People shifted in their seats, hands reached out to those who were affected most deeply. He expected pain to surface, but the courage to connect released something powerful in the room. A woman sitting at the front began to speak softly. I never had the chance to say goodbye to my brother. It haunts me every time I hear someone mention him. I wish I could tell him I loved him. More heads nodded in recognition of the universal ache of loss. Eric's heart swelled as he watched the connections forming. This was the purpose of the gathering, a space to embrace not just joy but sorrow, too. Flora lingered at the back, still distant, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Eric wanted to reach her, to draw her in. Flora, he called gently, making space. Would you like to share? Her gaze met his, a mixture of fear and yearning. The room went silent, tension crackling in the air. He could see her battling within herself, weighing the fragile boundaries of vulnerability against the fear of exposing her heart. Her voice faltered. I don't know if I can. Yet something shifted in the atmosphere. You're not alone, a voice from the side encouraged. We're all here together. Eric felt that invisible thread binding them even tighter, a collective heartbeat resonating in the room. Flora took a deep breath, allowing the moment to wash over her. I lost my father to illness, and it made me feel so alone. I was angry for so long. But I see now how many others feel this way. She paused, breaths coming quicker. I just wish I could find the strength to let go of that anger. A murmur of understanding swept through the crowd. Eric saw heads nodding again, the connection growing deeper. In this moment of shared vulnerability, Flora discovered her strength. The space felt alive, charged with empathy and courage. Eric's heart raced as he realized their stories, tangled in threads of sorrow, were meticulously stitching together a tapestry of hope. But amidst the healing, he sensed an undercurrent, something unspoken lurking just beneath the surface. Maybe this is a beginning, he offered, carefully. A chance to let out what's been coiled tightly inside us. But it scares me too what other stories still linger in the depths. The older woman caught his gaze, her eyes a well of understanding. Sometimes, we must face the darkness before we can find the light. People shared murmurs of agreement, but Eric knew the moment was fragile. What truths would emerge from this crowd of hidden struggles? As families gathered together closely, Eric felt a shift, a collective exhale, but his mind raced with uncertainty. Would this newfound courage suffice to confront what lay ahead? As the last of their shared stories faded, Eric clenched his fists, feeling a surge of determination. They were navigating dark waters, but he sensed that on the other side lay a profound transformation waiting to unfold. Would they be able to find their way through the shadows together? The silence that followed felt like a collective breath held tight in the room. Eric looked around, seeing faces flushed with emotion, eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and hope. He sensed they were standing at the edge of a great abyss, a place where pain could break them or forge them into something stronger. "Do you all feel that?" he asked, his voice filling the stillness. "That weight? It's heavy, but maybe it's also lightening." His words hung in the air. Faces turned toward him, and he saw the flicker of understanding. Flora's gaze drifted toward the floor, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Something shifted inside Eric as he watched her battle not just with her past but with the potential for healing. "Flora, it's okay," he encouraged softly. "You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." As if on cue, someone else's voice rose from the back. "I never thought I'd feel comfortable sharing here," a middle-aged woman said, her breath hitching. "But hearing everyone talk, it makes me realize how common this pain is. I lost my mother decades ago, but that hole never filled. I still feel unfinished. Like she's waiting for me to reach her somehow." Her honesty encouraged others, and slowly, more stories emerged. A younger man, his voice shaky with nerves, spoke about the grief of losing his job, the way that loss trickled into every aspect of his life, unearthing doubts and fears he didn't know he had. Each revelation added another layer to their tapestry of struggle. "Thank you for sharing that," someone else said, her voice filled with warmth. "I think we all want to be heard, don't we? It's like we've bottled things up for so long, and maybe today, we can finally let some of it out." Eric felt a potent surge of energy moving through the group. They were no longer isolated in their separate griefs, they were becoming an ensemble, a chorus of shared experiences. And with each word, he felt the barrier between them dissolve even more. As laughter and tears mingled in the air, he noticed Flora finally standing taller, a spark igniting behind her hesitant eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly but firmly, "of letting go. What if I forget him?" A chorus of voices rushed to reassure her. "You won't forget. You carry their love within you. You only let go of the pain, not the memories," someone echoed, bringing nods of agreement that unfurled across the room. Eric felt a swell in his chest. We're all scared together. But maybe it's in stepping into that fear that we find our way back to joy. He watched Flora swallow hard, the fight in her expression slowly giving way to the hope radiating around her. As more voices rose, Eric felt a hidden tension in the atmosphere, a desperate need to go deeper, to open the door to uncharted territories. They were on the brink of something transformative, yet there were shadows lurking just out of sight. He could sense them. "Let us keep sharing," he said, "but let us also be brave enough to explore what's beneath the surface." "Is there anyone who feels they have something darker to share?" something that's been weighing even more heavily? A silence settled as people glanced at each other, eyes flickering with uncertainty and fear. Would they take this next step? Flora caught Eric's gaze. In her eyes, he saw a resolve blooming, and he wondered, could she lead the way into that depth? What if sharing these shadows brings our light even closer? Eric suggested, heart racing. As he posed the question, he felt the entire room lean in, breaths held tight like strings pulled taut. In that moment, it became clear, they were on the precipice of a profound revelation. What truths would come forth? What could they unearth together as they embraced their collective darkness? Only time would tell. Eric's heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the room, the faces now streaked with a mix of hope and apprehension. The weight of unshared stories hung heavily, each person teetering on the edge of vulnerability. Attention permeated the atmosphere, almost crackling with potential. Flora took a deep breath, her hands grasping the chair like it was the only thing anchoring her. I have something, she finally said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The room quieted even more, eyes focusing intently on her. I haven't told anyone about how angry I felt after he died. I thought I should grieve, but instead, I was just mad. Mad at him for leaving, mad at myself for not trying harder to be there more. Her voice cracked, and she swallowed hard, looking down at her hands, which were trembling now. It's okay to feel that way, Flora, Eric encouraged gently, sensing both her need for acceptance and her fear of shame. Your feelings matter, every single one of them. A murmur of agreement echoed through the room, creating a circle of support around her. As her gaze lifted, he saw a glimmer of something in her eyes, a blend of fear and relief. I just feel so lost, she continued, her voice gaining strength. I keep replaying our last moments together, thinking I could have done something different. I feel like I'm trapped in this cycle, and sometimes it feels like I don't even deserve to be happy. A man seated to the right spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. I get that. I felt the same way after I lost my sister. I resented everyone who smiled, everyone who seemed to move on. Like somehow, their happiness was a betrayal of her memory. It's a dark place to be. Eric nodded in solidarity, feeling the depth of their shared darkness. As more stories began to weave between them, Eric's heart began to swell with a sense of purpose. They were unraveling, not just their grief, but the raw humanity behind it. With each story, their burdens lightened, their shadows illuminated by words that spilled out like long-held secrets. A grandmother spoke about her failed marriage, the heartbreak surfacing as she recounted the moments of love that twisted into bitterness. A teenager tearfully confessed to battling feelings of worthlessness after losing a friend to addiction. As the stories layered, Eric witnessed something truly beautiful. Each admission stirred the room, causing waves of connection and empathy to ripple through their collective consciousness. Flora, her eyes brighter now, leaned forward, her voice steadier than before. What if we consider this anger as part of our healing? What if acknowledging it means we get to honor those we lost in ways we never thought possible? Her question hung in the air, and Eric felt a shift, a collective intake of breath. It was an invitation to redefine their relationship with loss. A woman in the back hesitated but finally raised her hand. What if we carved out something positive from our pain? Like a tribute to those we've lost? The suggestion took off, igniting dialogues about creating memorials, art installations, and even community events. Ideas flowed effortlessly, each one more hopeful than the last. The heaviness of grief transformed into a springboard for action and hope. As the discussion grew animated, Eric's heart swelled. Could this group really shift from being defined by their sorrow to being empowered by their shared experiences? He felt a kinship with them all, one that radiated warmth and strength, but then, a small voice broke through the excitement. I still don't know how to let go, a young woman murmured softly, vulnerability seeping back into the atmosphere. In that moment, Eric understood, they had opened a door, but with each step forward, new questions emerged, challenging their resolve. How could they truly embrace this journey of healing without leaving something invaluable behind? The energy in the room swirled with unresolved emotions and growing determination, each person grappling with their own paths. Maybe, Eric began, breathing deeply, the hardest truth to face is figuring out what letting go really means for each of us. What will we hold on to, not just from our grief, but from our loved ones' legacies? Their eyes locked on him, the air electric with anticipation. They stood united at the threshold of understanding a journey still unfolding. Would this quest for peace lead them to unexpected revelations? As Eric's words hung like a delicate thread in the air, he sensed they were just getting started. As the conversations flowed, Eric felt time stretch and bend with an energy he had never experienced before. The walls of their fears crumbled slowly, each story serving as both an anchor and a lifeline. They had shifted from survivors of individual grief to a unified force eager to honor their legacies together. Flora spoke again, her voice steadier. We can't just brush over our memories. Each laugh, each tear, they're part of the tapestry we carry. Let us create something together that keeps them alive. Nods spread through the room like wildfire. Eric sensed the collective heartbeat, a new rhythm of hope. How about a community garden? He suggested. A place where we can plant flowers or trees in their honor. It'll remind us of their lives, while nurturing the future. Absolutely. A voice from the back called out, throwing the idea further into the air. And we can incorporate stories into markers at each plant. It could be a living tribute. Excitement crackled through the group. Plans began to take shape. Those who had battled with their grief started to envision healing actively. Eric could see Flora standing taller, her fierce determination igniting the spark of courage in others. Let us organize a day to plant together, she said suddenly, her eyes bright. A day of laughter, of togetherness, where we can also grieve. Eric's heart soared. Could this be it? The turning point they had longed for? Yes. We can celebrate our shared history while creating something new. Someone else added, and a surge of agreements followed. The room buzzed with energy, filled with a determination to create a space that intertwined their history with the present. As Eric watched the familiar faces illuminate with hope, he felt a warmth spread through him. This wasn't just a garden, it was a sanctuary where they could honor the past and cultivate the future. Would they finally unearth the strength that lay dormant within? Once the initial plans took form, there was a hush as they gathered again. Eric sensed the air vibrate with potential. What about a memory wall? He proposed. A place where we paint memories and messages we've held on to, a community canvas that captures our stories. The idea ignited an entirely new conversation, flowing with ideas on how to express love mural style. As voices joined together, creating bright visions of what they could build, insecurities began to fade. This is it. Eric realized, feeling the pulse of the community drawing closer. Every painful story shared was an offering, a way to lighten the burdens they had carried for too long. They were slowly stepping into the light, transforming grief into strength. The day finally arrived. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the freshly turned earth as families gathered to plant in the community garden. Eric stood among them, feeling a buoyant sense of pride. Laughter echoed through Norsewood, rippling like a current of energy that filled the air with joy and connection. Flora approached him, a radiant smile breaking across her face. It's beautiful, isn't it? She exclaimed, glancing at the bustling activity. Yes, Eric responded, heart swelling. But what matters is this: what we've built intentionally together. They both watched as neighbors stepped forward, sharing not only plants but their laughter, sealing moments of vulnerability in this vibrant act of creation. As the sun began to set, the horizon awash in pink and orange colors, a heartwarming sense of closure settled over the garden. Not only had they nurtured the soil, but also their collective spirit, binding them tighter than ever. Eric raised his voice, marshalling everyone's attention. Thank you for being here, not just to plant but to nurture each other's stories. Today is a victory. As applause spilled over, Eric caught sight of Flora, her face radiant as she intertwined arms with the older woman who had first shared her sorrow. Tears pricked Eric's eyes. Would they finally find healing together? In that moment, he knew the answer: yes. They had cracked open the door of hope and stepped through. As whispers of promise filled the air, Eric understood that the darkness they once faced wasn't meant to last. Together, they had transformed it into something beautiful. Hope in honor of their shared stories. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, as they embraced the future, Eric dared to believe they would flourish, as ancestors would have wanted. Now, let this moment spark something in your own lives. Celebrate your stories, find your connections, and never hold back your courage to share. You need to subscribe now for more transformative, inspiring stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to ensure everyone sees our mission together. Comment below your thoughts and feelings about this powerful transformation. And for goodness sake, share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this journey of healing. Don't wait not even one more second to share the love.